Okay, boys, welcome to LJG Sports. What happened with Shedeur Sanders? Um, you're probably just surprised as I am as how Shedeur Sanders slid to the 144th pick in the NFL draft. Once considered a consensus top 10 player, once considered the top quarterback in the class, dropped to the fifth round. He was a day 3 pick. I honestly couldn't believe it. So let's talk about what happened. I think, first of all, let me just give what I thought about Shedeur Sanders going into the draft. Me and my friend talked about it the day of the draft before while I was at work, and we were talking about will he be a top 10 pick? And my thinking was, when he first asked me, my friend, I was thinking, okay, Shedeur is not a top 10 pick to me. Cam Ward, I was pretty sure was going to be the first quarterback off the board. If not by the Titans, he would be picked up by another team. I thought he was going to be the first quarterback off the board. And then after that, I thought Shedeur would be second. And my thinking was, did any of the teams in the top 10 really need a quarterback that desperately? And if they did, they would draft Shedeur. And so when I thought about it more, I thought, okay, Shedeur won't go top 10, but at worst, he wouldn't get past 24, 25. He won't go past round 1. He'll be a late round 1. At the worst, an early round 2. He doesn't get drafted on day 1. And it was shocking, mainly because the Giants traded with my Texans to move up to 25, and they picked Jackson Dart. And me personally, I don't see Jackson Dart being anything. I don't think he's a first-round talent. Big arm, questionable decision-making from what I saw of him at Ole Miss. I would take Sanders over Jackson Dart in my personal opinion, just for higher upside in my opinion, but that's neither here or there. That was surprising. But I was like, okay, Shedeur surely will go round 2 pretty early tomorrow. I feel like a team's going to trade up, snag him, and that'll be his fall. He doesn't get drafted in round 2, not even in round 3. He is not drafted day 2. That's where I was like, okay, what is going on? Because you don't go from a consensus top 10 pick. You don't go from a argued top quarterback in the draft class to bang, gone. You don't go from headlines about the Cowboys trading away Dak Prescott, the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, to draft Shedeur Sanders and bring Coach Prime to Dallas. That just doesn't happen. Like, why did he drop out of even day 2? Like, day 2 is crazy. And so then you get to day 3, I'm like, okay. I was honestly thinking after round 4 when he didn't get drafted, I was like, is this guy going to get drafted? Is there something that NFL teams and execs and GMs know that we don't know about? But he does get picked up eventually by the Cleveland Browns of all teams. Because not only do the Cleveland Browns have Deshaun Watson, obviously a $200 million fully guaranteed quarterback, they also just selected Dylan Gabriel. Because they selected Dylan Gabriel earlier in the draft. So it didn't make much sense to me. I was really surprised that they drafted Shedeur Sanders after they had Dylan Gabriel. After they had Deshaun Watson and they drafted Dylan Gabriel. But that's neither here or there. That'll be an interesting quarterback room going into next year for the Browns. But yeah, so Shedeur Sanders drops to 144. So what happened? And I tried to do research while his drop was happening, and I was like, why is this happening? I heard things about he really did bad in the interview cycles, that he didn't have great interviews, but I was like, okay, prospects in sports have had bad interviews before. But when they're considered consensus top 10 at one point, you just don't drop that far into round 5 because of bad interviews. That just doesn't happen. I also heard that people were saying that they didn't want to deal with Coach Prime and his whatever comes with that, it's like, okay, but he's coaching at Colorado, and it's like, sure, I didn't get that really. I also heard that there were things about they didn't like Shedeur's arrogance, that there was an arrogance to him, that he seemed entitled. And I can get that. But again, why does he drop all the way down to the 5th round? Once consensus top 10 drops to the 5th round. I honestly don't think I've seen anything like it ever since covering the draft to the extent that I do. I don't go deep into covering the draft, but I try to know the prospects as well as I can, especially for my favorite teams. And then I also saw a report, and this one was interesting. There's nothing to confirm it, but there was a report that I saw, and I don't know who reported it. Don't remember the name of the report, what the headline was, but basically they were saying that Shedeur purposefully did not do well in some of the interviews to try to avoid being drafted by certain teams. And at first I was like, why would he do that? But then it kind of made sense to me if there were already rumblings and there's reports about him having this arrogance to him and how he feels like he's above this and above that. It doesn't fall out of line or out of question. It doesn't go out of character for someone like that to purposefully bomb interviews and just do bad on purpose to not get drafted by those teams. And it also brings back to a point where I remember that there were rumblings about his dad, Deion Sanders, was saying that he wouldn't allow his son to play for certain teams and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, if that were the case, let's say this is true. It's not confirmed. It's just a report I saw. Let's just say this was true. That the reports about Shedeur Sanders being arrogant were true. And that he was entitled were true. And that his dad, Coach Prime, did not want and tried to purposefully control the teams he went to because he didn't want him going to certain teams. And the fact that Shedeur purposefully did terrible or bad in interviews with certain teams to not get drafted by them, to try to control where he went. It is not out of question for a lot of NFL teams to look at this behavior for a guy that, personally, I don't think he's a great talent. Was he considered consensus top 10 at one point? Yes, but that was mainly because I didn't think there were that many good QBs in this class. Like, I think Cam Ward is decent, but I don't think he's like a usual number 1 overall pick. So is it unreasonable to believe that with all those things true, and for a guy that I believe, and I'm sure a lot of other NFL GMs, owners, execs believe to be not that good, to be like, we just don't want to deal with him, and that it's like, let another team deal with that? It's not out of the question for him to drop that far. Is it still kind of excessive at that point? Maybe. But you got to think about it this way too. If all those things are true and he's dropping, I think he was like a day 2 guy. So if teams already thought he was a day 2 guy and they heard the stuff about him being arrogant, him being entitled, him not wanting to go to teams, him being doing bad in the interviews to try to control his way to a certain team, to his dad and all that stuff and all the shenanigans that come with that, with all the flashiness, the arrogance. If he's already a day 2 guy, why draft him in day 2? Like, that kind of lowers his value. So you're thinking maybe draft him late round 3 or early day 3, so round 4. But then once you get to that point and after round 4, he's not drafted, right? Or the first couple picks go by, he's not drafted, and quarterbacks are going before him, like Dylan Gabriel, like Jackson Dart. Then you're a team and you're like, you don't want to be the team that looks like a fool for taking him and that all the NFL teams passed up on him because he was arrogant, he was entitled, he was this, he was that. And you were the one team that was like, okay, we're going to take the chance on him. And it ends up not working out because a lot of teams, I would assume, did not think of him as a day one talent. Why would you take the risk? And that's the only thing I can think of at this point for why a consensus top 10 pick in Shedeur Sanders would go in round 5. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Why do you think Shedeur Sanders dropped so far? Where would have you picked him? Where do you think his talent level was? Because personally, for me, like I said, I didn't think he was all that good. I know his 40-yard dash time reported 40-yard dash time was in question. It wasn't even that fast. So I don't know. What do you guys think of Shedeur Sanders? What do you think about this whole situation? Please let me know down in the comments what you disagree with, agree with.